The sun peeked through the slats of my blinds, casting stripes of light on the hardwood floor of my modest living room. Outside, the first signs of spring whispered through the neighborhood, promising renewal and growth. But within the confines of our meticulously manicured suburban enclave, the air was thick with something else, a simmering tension only perceptible to those attuned to its frequency. In the melody of life here, Karen's disharmony was a sharp, discordant note. She was the self-proclaimed steward of the homeowners association, her domain of order and control. I often wondered if she saw herself as a queen, presiding over her kingdom of cookie-cutter houses and emerald lawns. Her latest decree was definitive and non-negotiable. Garage sales were banned. It was a proclamation delivered with the same finality as an emperor's edict. No more clutter on curbs, no more haggling over trinkets and treasures. The neighborhood's pulse slowed, suffocated by her newfound rule. She was a force to reckon with, or so she believed. Her presence was a gust of wind, enough to rattle those unprepared or unwilling to stand their ground. I, however, had always preferred to be the willow tree, gently bending but never breaking. Her petty mandates were mere breezes against my resolve. I watched her initial actions with a detached curiosity. As one might observe a child's tantrum, Karen's first move was to dismantle the community bulletin board, a small, sun-bleached slab of cork that had long served as our marketplace of ideas and announcements. She tore down the posters, each a testament to someone's hopes, from missing pets to yoga classes, garage sales, and everything in between. With a steely resolve, she replaced them with a single, pristine document. The new HOA regulations, neatly typed and laminated. A monument to her authority. As neighbors muttered and grumbled, I found myself amused by the absurdity of it all. Life was too short for such trivialities. But Karen had made her chess move, and the game had begun. In response, I chose not confrontation, but subtlety. The ripples of her actions were met with the calm surface of my intentions. I concocted my plan with quiet satisfaction. If Karen wanted to strip away our simple pleasures, I'd offer something in return. Not rebellion, but revelation. A gift wrapped in irony with a bow of defiance. I named it Free HOA Rule Book Day, a tongue-in-cheek challenge to her reign. The idea took shape with a clarity that surprised even me. I envisioned our street decorated with tables piled high with stacks of rule books, each one a symbol of the bureaucracy she cherished so dearly. I would scatter them like seeds, letting them fall where they may. For one day, the neighborhood would bask in the absurdity of its own constraints, laid bare for all to see. It was not rebellion, but a gentle reminder, a nudge towards reflection and perhaps reconciliation. As the day approached, I felt a familiar, calm anticipation, the kind that comes before the first drop of rain on a parched earth. In the quiet of that morning, I mused on the irony of it all. Karen had sought to control, but in doing so, she had unlocked something far more potent. The power of quiet resistance, of standing firm without raising a voice. I settled into the rhythm of my day, awaiting the audience who would undoubtedly gather, drawn as much by curiosity as by the promise of something free. There was a satisfaction in knowing that in the theater of suburban life, I had penned the opening act, and Karen, whether she realized it or not, was about to take center stage. The sun had barely crested the horizon when I noticed the first ripple of activity from Karen's corner of the cul-de-sac. A blur of energy, she moved like a general strategizing for battle, each step meticulous, yet charged with an undercurrent of rebellion. Her lawn, usually a pristine green canvas, was now dotted with tables stacked with glossy booklets. The infamous HOA rule books, texts we'd all received yet rarely perused, were now the centerpiece of her latest gambit. Our neighborhood had its own rhythm, a symphony of well-tended gardens, muffled lawnmowers, and the faint scent of barbecue lingering in the air. But Karen's actions threatened to introduce a discordant note. Her signs, bold and unapologetic, proclaimed, "Free HOA Rule Book Day?" An ironic nod to the recently banned garage sales. Karen, with her ever-present clipboard, had become more than a resident. She was a force of nature, a tempest clad in discount couture, with the ability to command attention without uttering a word. As I watched from the window, sipping my still steaming coffee, I couldn't help but admire her audacity. It was a peculiar kind of genius, the way she wove defiance into her daily routine like a thread through fabric. The rule books, with their officious covers and dense, sleep-inducing prose, had never seemed so enticing. A crowd began to gather, drawn not by the promise of enlightenment but by the spectacle of it all. Neighbors shuffled over, some feigning nonchalance, others openly curious. Karen greeted each with a nod, her expression a mask of serene authority. Her presence acted as a catalyst, and soon whispers spread like wildfire. Stories of arbitrary citations and absurd regulations bubbled to the surface. Someone recounted the time Karen had been fined for having her trash can out an hour too early, a transgression that seemed almost laughable now. The rule book, once a symbol of control, had become Karen's weapon of choice, a physical manifestation of the absurdity she sought to expose. Amidst the quiet buzz, a single line of dialogue pierced the air. A neighbor, more emboldened than the rest, asked, "Is this really necessary?" It was a question laced with both skepticism and a hint of admiration. Karen, never one to waste words, simply raised an eyebrow, a gesture that spoke volumes. The moment stretched, filled with the weight of unspoken understanding. I watched as the crowd began to disperse, each person clutching a rule book like a talisman. Karen had succeeded in planting a seed, subtle yet potent. My gaze lingered on her for a moment longer. She was a maestro directing a symphony of dissent. Her baton, the very guidelines meant to curtail us. In the days that followed, the neighborhood hummed with renewed energy. Citations were scrutinized with fresh eyes, and the HOA's grip seemed to loosen, if only slightly. Karen's act of rebellion, small yet significant, had set forth a chain reaction. We were no longer passive inhabitants of our own homes, but active participants, questioning, challenging, and perhaps dreaming of a day when harmony and freedom could coexist. The sun had begun its lazy descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. I stood on my driveway surveying the scene I had orchestrated. The stacks of HOA rule books were arranged like sentinels on the tables, their pristine covers silhouetted against the fading light. Each one a testament to the silent rebellion I had carefully planned. Each one a reminder of the absurdity that had gripped our neighborhood. The quiet was deceptive. Underneath, a current of tension was building, like the distant rumble of thunder before a storm. One by one, neighbors began to filter out of their homes, curiosity etched on their faces. Some came with tentative steps, others with the bold stride of those who had long grown weary of the HOA's heavy hand. I watched them approach, their eyes flitting between the books and me. Their expressions were a mosaic of confusion, amusement, and something akin to hope. I could almost hear their thoughts. What is this? Has she lost her mind? Or perhaps, finally, someone who stood up. The irony was not lost on me. We couldn't have garage sales, but we could have this. This parade of defiance dressed in the guise of compliance. Free HOA rule books, indeed. A subtle mockery of the authority that sought to constrain us. A breeze stirred, rustling the pages of the open rule book beside me. I turned a page, a gesture that felt like turning the tide. Cars slowed as they passed, drivers craning their necks to catch a glimpse. I met their glances with a calm, steady gaze. Let them see. Let them wonder. One neighbor, a woman with a perpetual scowl, lingered at the edge of her yard, arms crossed. I could feel her skepticism like a tangible thing. But she didn't leave, and in her hesitation, I sensed a crack in the armor of indifference. For so long, we had been passive, accepting. Maybe this was a beginning. There was a quiet satisfaction in the small acts of defiance, the simple act of stepping outside the bounds they had drawn for us. I watched as someone picked up a book, thumbing through the pages as if searching for something, understanding perhaps, or maybe just the courage to question. A low, murmuring began to ripple through the gathering crowd. I could see heads nodding, small smiles spreading like wildfire. A shared understanding was taking root, a communal recognition of the absurdity of it all. It was contagious, this quiet revolt. My gaze wandered to the sky, now a deep cobalt, the first stars timidly appearing. This was how change started, I realized. Not with grand gestures or loud proclamations, but with small, deliberate acts. With quiet strength and unyielding persistence. As the evening deepened, the neighborhood came alive with a new energy. The air buzzed with possibility. And amidst it all, I stood anchored, a witness to the transformation unfolding before me. A symphony of irony and rebellion, set to the steady beat of defiance. Perhaps they would see it too, the neighbors who had once turned away. Maybe they would find their voice in this chorus of dissent, this anthem of quiet rebellion. For now, I watched, content to let the moment unfold. The storm was coming, and I was ready to face it. As the sun dipped behind the low-roofed houses, leaving the streets awash in hues of orange and deep purple, I stood on my lawn, feeling a quiet satisfaction settle in my bones. It was done. The last of the free HOA Rule Book Day pamphlets had been distributed, and the remaining copies sat in a lopsided pile on my lawn, yellowed by the sun through their translucent covers. Each booklet was a tangible rebellion, a silent protest against the strangling grip of HOA rules, wielded with too much fervor by Karen, the self-appointed arbiter of our lives. Karen had always insisted on order. Her presence in the community meetings was like that of a hawk, circling above, ready to dive at the first sign of dissent. Her voice, always just a decibel over everyone else's, carried the weight of the rules she brandished as gospel. I had watched her for years, her power manifesting in the tightly pruned hedges and uniformity of our lawns. But today was different. Today, the rule books, stark white against the grass, whispered a different story. Neighbors drifted by, their curiosity piqued by the unexpected offering. Each paused, hesitated, and then, with a furtive glance around, took a booklet. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here, where garage sales were banished to preserve the sanctity of our streets, residents now freely exchanged the very rules that had curbed their freedoms. A small rebellion, but powerful in its quiet defiance. As dusk painted the world in darker shades, I noticed Helen from down the street. She lingered by the pile, her fingers tracing the edges of the cover before she picked up a book. Her eyes met mine, and in that moment, I saw a spark of the resistance I had hoped to ignite. There was no need for words. The understanding was mutual, a silent agreement that the time for change was now. Karen's house was still, its windows dark. Perhaps she was inside, plotting her next move. Or maybe she was watching from the shadows, realizing that her iron grip was slipping. It was not my intention to oust her, but to restore balance, to remind her, and everyone, that power unchecked is a burden, not a privilege. The air grew cooler, the chatter of neighbors softening to a murmur. The calm after the storm, I mused, watching as the last of the pamphlets disappeared into the night. My heart swelled with a quiet triumph. I had no illusions about what tomorrow might bring. Karen would not fade quietly into obscurity. Her presence was too entrenched for that. But tonight, the community had spoken. Our small act of rebellion was a seed, and I could only hope it would find fertile ground. As I turned to head back inside, a familiar voice pierced the quiet. It was Karen, her silhouette barely visible in the dim light. Her tone was hard to read, but her words hung in the air like a challenge. Enjoy it while it lasts. I smiled, a soft, knowing smile. Enjoy it while it lasts. Yes, I intended to do just that. Our lives, our choices, and even our rebellions were fleeting, but their impact could last far longer. The night was still young, and the community, awakened to the possibility of change, had only just begun to dream again.